I didn't report the second tower the first time I saw it. If I had, maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe Caleb would still be alive. Maybe I wouldn't wake up every night at exactly 3:17 a.m. Maybe I wouldn't keep finding dirt beneath my fingernails, even though I haven't been back to that mountain in 3 years. The official story says I resigned after suffering stress-induced hallucinations. That's what the Forest Service believes. That's what's written in my file. The truth is much worse, because I know what I saw, and I know the second tower was real. I was 28 when I took the lookout job. The tower sat on a remote peak in Idaho, miles from the nearest town, miles from the nearest road, the kind of isolation most people can't handle. I loved it. The silence, the endless forests, the feeling of being completely alone. My job was simple: watch for smoke, report fires, stay in contact with dispatch. The tower itself was old, built sometime in the 1940s. For wooden legs, one small cabin at the top, solar panels, radio equipment, basic supplies, nothing unusual. At least that's what I thought. On my first day, the ranger delivering supplies handed me a folded note. Not official paperwork, just a handwritten note. He seemed embarrassed giving it to me, like he didn't really believe it, but felt obligated anyway. The note contained 4 rules. Rule 1. If you see another fire tower after sunset, do not acknowledge it. Rule 2. Never answer radio transmissions received at exactly 3:17 a.m. Rule 3. If someone knocks on the tower door after dark, do not let them inside. Rule 4. If the second tower turns on its beacon, leave immediately. I laughed. The ranger didn't. He just stared at me, then said something strange. The last lookout laughed too. Before I could ask what happened to him, he climbed back into his truck and left. I remember standing there watching the vehicle disappear down the mountain, thinking the guy was crazy, thinking somebody was playing a joke. I stopped laughing 3 nights later. The first 2 nights were normal. Beautiful, actually. Sunsets, stars, radio chatter. Nothing strange, nothing supernatural, just wilderness. Then came night 3. Around dusk, I was making coffee when something caught my eye. Far away, across a valley, another mountain ridge. I grabbed my binoculars. At first, I thought I was looking at a communications tower. Then I focused, and my stomach dropped. It was a fire lookout, a tower, almost identical to mine, standing on a distant ridge. The problem? There wasn't supposed to be a tower there. I knew every lookout in the region. There were maps, coordinates, records. No tower existed on that mountain. Yet there it stood, perfectly visible. Wooden legs, glass cabin, solar panels, everything. I stared for nearly 5 minutes, trying to make sense of it. Then I remembered Rule 1. If you see another fire tower after sunset, do not acknowledge it. Suddenly the rule wasn't funny anymore. I lowered the binoculars immediately. When I looked back a few seconds later, the tower was gone. The ridge was empty. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a trick of the light. A shadow, atmospheric distortion, anything but what it appeared to be. Then I checked the old tower logs. Every lookout keeps a journal. Weather observations, wildlife sightings, equipment issues, normal stuff. Most entries were boring. Then I reached an entry from 8 years earlier. One sentence had been underlined repeatedly. Do not look at the other tower for too long. Several pages later, I found another. It looked back. I closed the journal. My hands were shaking. That night, I saw the tower again. This time it appeared earlier, just before sunset. Same ridge, same location, same impossible structure. Only now something was different. There was movement inside, a silhouette, someone standing in the windows, watching me. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. The figure didn't move, didn't wave, didn't gesture, just stood there, looking toward my tower, toward me. The sun finally dipped below the horizon. Darkness settled across the mountains, and that's when the second tower's windows lit up, one by one, as though someone had turned on lanterns inside. I remembered Rule 1. Do not acknowledge it. So I forced myself away from the window. I made dinner, listened to music, tried distracting myself. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., my radio crackled. I nearly jumped out of my chair. Static filled the cabin. Then a voice emerged. My voice. Not similar. Not close. Mine. Can you hear me? I froze. The radio hissed. Then my own voice spoke again. Please answer. Every instinct told me to respond. The transmission sounded terrified, desperate, human. Then I remembered Rule 2. Never answer transmissions received at exactly 3:17 a.m. So I stayed silent. The voice continued. I know you're there. A pause. Then, I can see your tower. The blood drained from my face. The transmission lasted nearly 3 minutes. My voice begging, pleading, warning. Then the radio went dead. The next morning, I searched the tower records again, this time looking specifically for references to 317. I found dozens. Every lookout had mentioned it. Every single one. One entry stood out, written by a man named Caleb, the lookout before me, the man who had vanished 6 months earlier. His final journal entry read, "The voice knows things it shouldn't know." Below that, tonight it knew my mother's name. Then one final sentence, written so hard the pen tore through the paper. IT isn't imitating me anymore. After reading that, I contacted dispatch, asked about Caleb. The dispatcher became uncomfortable immediately, then changed the subject. That reaction told me everything. People knew, maybe not the truth, but something. The following evening, I saw the second tower again. Only this time, it wasn't on the distant ridge. It was closer, much closer. At first I thought I was imagining it. Then I checked through binoculars. The distance had changed. The tower had moved. Impossible, but true. It now stood on a ridge several miles nearer than before. Close enough to see details. Close enough to see movement. Close enough to see someone standing inside. The figure looked familiar. Too familiar. I stared harder. The figure stared back. Then it raised a hand and waved. The realization hit me like a punch. The person inside the second tower was me. Exactly me. Same face. Same clothes. Same posture. Same everything. Standing in the window. Watching. Smiling. And that's when the radio crackled again. Even though it wasn't 3:17. Even though it was barely sunset. A voice came through. My voice. Calm. Friendly. Patient. And it said only one thing. You're finally looking in the right direction. Then the transmission ended, and somewhere out in the darkness, the second tower's beacon switched on. The moment the beacon turned on, every light inside my tower flickered. Not once, not twice, continuously, like the entire electrical system was struggling to stay alive. I remembered Rule 4 immediately. If the second tower turns on its beacon, leave immediately. For the first time since arriving on the mountain, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my radio, my emergency pack, my keys. Then I started down the stairs. Halfway down, I made a mistake. I looked back. The second tower's beacon wasn't rotating like a normal lookout beacon. It wasn't sweeping across the landscape. It was pointed directly at me. A solid column of white light. Like an eye. Watching. Following. Tracking. I descended the remaining stairs as fast as I could. The forest around the tower felt wrong. The silence had changed. No insects, no wind, no animals, nothing. Then I heard footsteps, somewhere among the trees, keeping pace with me. I froze. The footsteps stopped. I moved. They moved. Always hidden, always nearby, never visible. My truck sat parked near the supply shed. I sprinted toward it. The moment I opened the driver's door, the radio erupted with static. Then a voice. Not mine, not human. Something pretending to be human. Don't leave. The voice sounded broken. Wrong. Like multiple recordings layered together. Male voices. Female voices. Children. Old people. All speaking at once. Don't leave. I threw the radio into the passenger seat and started the engine. The truck roared to life. For a second, I thought I'd escaped. Then my headlights swept across the forest. And I saw them. People. Dozens of them. Standing between the trees, motionless, watching, men, women, children, all staring directly at the tower. Not at me, at the tower. Every face looked pale, expressionless, like they'd been standing there for years. Then one of them moved. Just one. A man stepped forward, and even from 50 yards away, I recognized him. Caleb, the missing lookout. The man whose final journal entry I'd read that morning. He stood perfectly still and slowly raised one hand, not waving, pointing toward the second tower. I slammed the truck into gear and drove. The dirt road wound down the mountain. Sharp turns, steep drops, loose gravel. I focused on the road, focused on getting away. Then I glanced into the rearview mirror. The second tower was still there. Impossible. It should have vanished behind the ridge, behind the trees, behind miles of terrain. Instead, it remained visible, following me, not physically moving, yet somehow never leaving sight. Its beacon remained locked onto the truck, locked onto me. For nearly 20 minutes, it stayed there, watching. Then the road curved. The tower disappeared. The beacon vanished. The pressure I'd been feeling immediately lifted. I finally breathed again. I drove another hour before reaching a ranger station. The night ranger listened to my story in complete silence. Didn't interrupt. Didn't question me. Didn't laugh. That terrified me more than anything. When I finished talking, he walked into a back office, returned carrying a file. Old, worn, heavy. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Fire lookout towers. Different decades. Different mountains. Different states. And in every photograph, there were two towers, the official one, and another tower in the distance. Always partially obscured. Always difficult to notice. Always present. My stomach twisted. How old is this? The ranger looked exhausted. 12 years. 12 years. He shook his head. No. Then he pointed to the oldest photograph. The image dated back to 1954. At least 70. The realization hit me slowly. The second tower wasn't connected to my mountain, or my region, or Idaho. It appeared everywhere. Anywhere people worked alone. Anywhere someone spent long periods watching. Waiting. Isolated. The ranger finally explained what little he knew. Nobody understood where the tower came from. Nobody knew what it wanted. But patterns existed. The second tower always appeared to isolated lookouts. The longer they acknowledged it, the closer it came. Some ignored it. Some quit. Some disappeared. Those who disappeared were never found. Except occasionally, when they appeared standing near the second tower. The same way Caleb had. The same way countless others had. I wanted answers. The ranger had none. Only warnings. Go home. That was his advice. Never go back. I followed it. At first, I resigned, packed my belongings, left Idaho, moved across the country, started a new job, tried rebuilding my life. For a few months it worked. Then the dreams began. Every night, the same dream. I stood inside the second tower, looking across a valley, watching my original tower, watching myself. The dreams felt real. Too real. Sometimes I'd wake up exhausted, covered in dirt, mud on my boots, pine needles on my bed, things that shouldn't have been possible. Then the photographs started arriving. No return address, no stamps, no indication of where they came from. Just photographs. Every one showing the second tower. Every one taken from a different angle, a different distance, a different location. And in every image, someone stood in the window, watching, waiting. At first the figure looked like me. Then something changed. Each photograph made the figure clearer, closer, more detailed. Eventually I realized the horrifying truth. The figure wasn't becoming me. It had always been me. The photographs weren't changing. My memory was. The final photograph arrived 6 months later. It contained only one image. A view from inside the second tower. Looking outward, looking across a valley. At another tower. A tower occupied by someone standing in the window. Someone watching. Someone who looked exactly like me. Written on the back were 6 words. You were never the first tower. For a long time, I didn't understand what that meant. Then one night, I woke up at exactly 3:17 a.m. My phone was ringing. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Static filled the line. Then a voice spoke. My voice. Older. Tired. Broken. The voice whispered. I finally figured it out. My heart stopped. The voice continued. There isn't a second tower. A pause. Then, there never was. The line crackled violently. I heard screaming. Wind. Something heavy moving across wooden floors. Then one final sentence. The sentence that still haunts me. The other tower is tomorrow. The call disconnected. I've spent 3 years trying to understand what that means. 3 years studying records. 3 years researching disappearances. 3 years searching for answers. Last week I found something. An old photograph from my first summer in Idaho. A photograph I'd seen dozens of times. A photograph of my lookout tower. Only now, there was something I swear wasn't there before. Something standing in the window, watching the camera, watching me. The figure looked exhausted, older, thinner, terrified. And when I zoomed in, I saw the name stitched onto the uniform. My name, except the date on the photograph wasn't from the past. It was from next year. And according to the timestamp burned into the corner of the image. The photograph hasn't been taken yet that I wish I could tell you I threw the photograph away. I wish I could tell you I ignored it, burned it, forgot about it. I didn't. I spent the next 3 weeks staring at it, analyzing every pixel, every shadow, every detail, because if the date on that photograph was real, then somehow I was looking at evidence from the future. And the version of me standing inside that tower looked terrified, not scared, not worried, terrified, like he'd already seen something impossible, something worse than the tower itself. Eventually, I noticed another detail. The man in the window wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking behind the camera, at something standing nearby, something the photograph didn't show. That realization bothered me more than anything else, because whatever had frightened future me wasn't inside the tower. It was outside, watching. A month later, I received another package. No return address, no stamp, no delivery record, just a plain cardboard box sitting outside my apartment. Inside was a notebook, old, weather-damaged, covered in mold. My hand started shaking the moment I opened it, because I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was mine, not similar, not close, mine. The notebook contained dozens of entries, every page written by me, except I'd never written any of them. The first entry began with a date from 8 months in the future. The final entry was dated 1 year ahead, exactly the same year shown in the photograph. I spent an entire night reading. The entries described things that hadn't happened yet. Conversations, events, places, details from my daily life. All accurate. Every prediction eventually came true, word for word, which meant whoever wrote the notebook knew my future, or had already lived it. Then I reached the final pages. The handwriting became erratic, messy, panicked. The entries repeated the same warning over and over. Do not follow the second tower. Do not follow the light. Do not answer yourself. The final entry was barely readable. Only a few lines remained clear. It read, I finally reached it. The tower isn't a place. It's a path. Then, every lookout sees it eventually. Then, every tower is connected. Then the last sentence. The sentence that made me slam the notebook shut. The sentence I still hear in nightmares. It said, the first tower is the trap. The second tower is the exit. And something is waiting at the end. I stopped reading after that. For a while, I tried returning to normal life. Tried pretending none of it existed. Then the sightings started. At first, I only noticed them while driving. A distant tower on a ridge, visible for a few seconds, then gone. Weeks later, I'd see another. Different state, different landscape, same tower, always watching, always appearing at sunset, always disappearing if I stared too long. Then one evening, I received a phone call from Caleb. At least that's what the caller ID said. Caleb Turner, the missing lookout, the man officially declared dead. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. The line connected. Static. Wind. Then Caleb spoke. His voice sounded exhausted, like he'd spent years screaming. Don't come here. I nearly dropped the phone. Caleb. The static intensified. Then he spoke again. We thought it was a place. A pause. It isn't. Something crashed in the background. A metallic sound. Heavy. Huge. Then Caleb whispered. It's moving. The line disconnected. I never heard from him again. But 2 nights later, I saw him. Not in person. On a security camera. The convenience store near my apartment had been robbed. Police released footage publicly. While watching the video, something caught my attention. A man stood outside the store, across the street, watching. The footage only showed him for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough. It was Caleb, exactly as he'd appeared in the old photographs. Exactly as he'd appeared on the mountain. Not aged, not changed. The footage disappeared 24 hours later. Removed, deleted. Nobody else seemed to notice. Nobody except me. At that point, I began believing something impossible. The tower wasn't collecting people. It was preserving them, keeping them, outside normal time. The notebook seemed to support that theory. So did the photographs. So did Caleb. Then came the night everything changed. The night I finally understood why lookouts disappear. It happened exactly 1 year after I left Idaho. I woke up at 3:17 a.m., the same way I always did. Except this time, there was light outside my bedroom window. A bright white light, moving slowly. I already knew what it was before I looked. Part of me didn't want to, but I looked anyway. The second tower stood outside my apartment building. Not nearby, not visible in the distance. Outside, directly outside. Impossible. The structure rose above the parking lot. For wooden legs, glass cabin, beacon glowing softly. It should not have fit there, should not have existed there. Yet it did. The city around it remained completely normal. Traffic lights, buildings, street signs, everything looked ordinary, except for the tower. Then I saw movement inside, a silhouette, watching me, waiting. The figure slowly stepped closer to the glass, and I finally saw its face. It was me, not another version, not a copy. Me, older, exhausted, covered in dirt. The same person from the future photograph. The same person from the notebook. The same person who had been trying to warn me. He raised one hand, then pointed behind me. My blood froze, because I was alone, or at least I thought I was. Slowly, I turned around. Someone was standing inside my apartment. A figure, motionless, watching. I couldn't see its face, couldn't see its features. The darkness around it seemed wrong, like it wasn't really part of the room. Then the figure moved, one step, then another, and for the first time in my life, I heard the sound described by every missing lookout. The sound none of them could properly explain. Wood creaking, not from my apartment, not from outside, from somewhere much larger, somewhere much taller, like an enormous staircase shifting under impossible weight. The figure took another step. The tower outside flashed its beacon once. The older version of me slammed both hands against the glass, screaming something, warning me. I couldn't hear the words, but I understood the message. Run. So I did. I ran out of that apartment, ran down 5 flights of stairs, ran into the street, ran until sunrise. When I finally gathered enough courage to return, the tower was gone. The figure was gone. The apartment was empty, except for one thing. A fresh notebook sat on my kitchen table. The cover was blank. Inside was a single page. One sentence, written in my handwriting. Today's date, tomorrow's signature, and 6 words that I still don't understand. You saw it before it saw you. That was 6 months ago. Since then, more pages have appeared. One at a time. Always overnight. Always written by me. Always describing events that haven't happened yet. Every prediction comes true. Every single one. The notebook is almost full now. Only 3 blank pages remain. I've read the final entry. I wish I hadn't, because according to the last page, exactly 17 days from now, I'm going back to Idaho, back to the original mountain, back to the tower. And according to the very last sentence in the notebook, when I arrive, the second tower won't be there anymore, because by then, it will finally be the only tower left.